Welcome to the Triple Threat Podcast. I am your host, Cooper Miller, alongside Mr. Lance Pearson, the superintendent at Kellogg. Um, Really excited to speak to you, Lance. It should be a lot of fun. It should be very productive.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's start from the very beginning. From what I understand, you grew up in California.
hmm
You played sports there. Tell me
Yep.
a little bit about what it was like growing up there.
Oh, okay. Grew up in the southern San Joaquin Valley. We were up in the mountains up by what's known as Sequoia National Park. Um, but it was, big. It was competitive. We played with some kids that went on to do some great things. Brant Brown, who was a batting coach for the Dodgers a couple years ago, was one of the local guys. And my younger brother, who lives in Osborne, was a D1 baseball player at Oral Roberts University.
Oh wow,
Yeah,
that's awesome. And from what I hear, you're a pretty good athlete yourself.
I did okay. I played some baseball in college and I enjoyed it. I loved basketball. I
hmm
thought that basketball with the big gyms
Yeah.
and the crowds going crazy with like inner city rivalries,
Uh-huh.
that was something.
Yeah. And did you play football? Little quarterback?
Yep, I did play football, played some quarterback. My claim to fame there was I was the hit of the week in back-to-back weeks on a Bakersfield station where I was the guy getting hit. So
Oh, that's
yeah,
hey, if not all press is great, but it's
yeah,
attention.
that's
So,
right, that's
but
right.
so as you were going through high school, did you know that you were going to be in education? Is that what you always wanted to do?
No, I kind of came into education um, just working a job at a point where I was working on a reservation and found out that I just liked working with kids,
hmm
and kind of I was in college at the time and thought, I'd do some volunteer work and did some volunteer work and found out that I really like kids. I was actually initially going to be a wildlife and fisheries biology
Okay.
major, and I switched to elementary ed and really found my niche and enjoyed it.
Yeah, and so tell me a little bit about your journey through education.
I started off as I was a firefighter too. I fought
Yeah.
fires, wildland fires, for 6 years. And after I graduated and got my credential, I thought I would finish the season,
hmm
fight fires through the fall, and and maybe vacation and travel or something like that. And a friend of mine sent me well, it wasn't a text or an email because we didn't have it. She actually called. She called the station and said, "There's a job you need to look at." And it was in this little small community. It was Native American. It was the smallest county in all of California,
Oh wow.
less than 1,000 people, and school was about 200 kids, K-8. And so I thought, okay, and it was kindergarten. I had
Yeah.
student taught in kindergarten, and I really found I liked kindergarten. And so I put in for it and got it, and moved up to basically South Lake Tahoe
Yeah.
in that area, and big mountains, lots of snow. I mean, my first year in South Lake Tahoe was 92, 93 that winter, and I want to say they got some 30 feet of snow or something
Yeah.
insane. I mean, it was something to see. And then I went from there, and I still went back and fought fires in the summertime. Eventually, I met your eighth grade math teacher. She came to the community as a volunteer in Service to America Vista,
Okay.
and met her and had I was going to go back and fight fires and had an appendicitis on Memorial Day weekend and figured that was a sign that my firefighting days were over. And I did a lot of coaching while I was there. Was very proud of the teams that we had. We had some really competitive. We were a very small school and we played some bigger schools, and the kids were some phenomenal athletes,
Yeah.
and we were able to compete with some bigger schools.
Yeah. And so you've been around the smaller school
Yeah,
um, landscape for a long time then.
yeah, definitely. And I worked in Reno in the Washoe County School District, which is one of the big top 50 biggest school districts in the nation,
Wow.
for 4 years while I was doing a master's up there, and knew enough that I didn't want to do that. Um, when I finished my master's, my parents, my brother, they live up in Troy, Montana, and so I thought, oh, there was a job up there, so I put in for it and
Yeah.
moved closer to family, and spent 8 years in Troy as an elementary school principal, and then I moved down to the Bitterroot Valley of Montana, where for 10 years I was the superintendent of a school. Victor, probably at the time they're a little bit smaller now, but at the time we were about the same size as Wallace.
Okay.
We used to play Wallace in the passing
Yeah.
leagues over in the summertime, and totally loved it. Got to do a lot. Coaching track, got to coach football, got to do these things that were really fun, and was very integrated with all the kids.
Yeah.
And yeah, for 10 years I did that, and oh gosh, before I came here, like 3 years before I came, the job came open, and I applied for it in Kellogg.
Mm-hmm.
My brother lives in Osborne now,
Yeah.
and so I put in for that, and I got the job, and then our principal got another job as a superintendent, and my school board and Victor said, "We won't make you stay, but could you please?" And so I backed out of Kellogg, and thought, it's just not the right time. And then 3 years later, it was the time.
Yep. And so when you went to Reno, obviously a big difference from teaching some smaller schools. What was the biggest difference, though, teaching smaller schools compared to the top 50 school district in the nation?
The biggest difference was that, like, when I look back at it now, this was all prior to social media, and kids from the smaller districts have found me and friended me and have maintained contact. Very few of those kids from Reno. I taught sixth grade for 3 years, and I was the dean of students for a year. And very few of those kids that you had as students, you didn't have that. When you're at Wallace, the teachers before you have them.
Right.
You see them. After you leave 8th grade, you still see your 8th grade math teacher. You still have that interaction.
Yeah.
They left, the 6th graders there left, and they went to a big middle school.
Yeah.
And I mean, with 2,000 kids, and you never saw them again.
Well, I think that's one of the great things about going to a small school, and you know this, of course, but you're able to build relations with a lot of the teachers. And my parents are both, of course, teachers, so I've know them probably on an even more personal level than most kids. But it's cool to see those relationships build between student and teacher, and I think those are so valuable.
Definitely, and I think that's at the heart of education,
Mm-hmm.
is having those good, solid relationships between teachers and students, where they know you, they have you for more than 1 year, and so they know your learning styles, they know where you're at, they know what types of things that you're good at doing and what types of things you need that extra little push in.
And that's another thing that's great about a small school is teachers know what your struggles are, what your strong suits are, and they're able to help you and educate you the way that you need to, and they're able to learn so much from you and how they should help you achieve great things.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's a great thing about going to a small school is you do get a little bit more one-on-one interaction with teachers too. I've learned that if I need help in math, if I need help in English, there's time for those things when I need a little one-on-one help.
Mm-hmm. And I really believe in small schools, and that includes Kellogg. Kellogg's, it's bigger than Wallace, but it's still a small school.
Yeah.
And the teachers, we have phenomenal teachers that make the time for their kids. And I see it even, I've walked in on Mr. Davidian, the principal, and he's in there in his office at lunch tutoring a kid in math. And that's one of the things that everybody does is, everyone's working hard to make sure all the kids' needs are met. And that's the beauty of a small school.
Yeah. And each kid's different, and some kids respond better to different teachers, and they are able to seek out those teachers and get help from them. And it's not so, you're not put in one box. You're not forced to be with certain teachers. You can be with whoever you connect with the most.
Right.
So, moving into the question that everyone is wanting to hear about, of course, the big kicker. So the levy, you're running that in, is it May?
May 19th.
Okay,
Yep.
May 19th, a date to remember. Make sure to get out and vote. But what does the levy provide?
The levy, the way that Idaho funds education is kind of similar to Montana,
Mhm.
and that the model is roughly 75% of the funds in 70 to 75% of the funds in Idaho come from the state.
Okay.
And then they say, we want you to levy those taxes locally.
Okay.
In Montana, it was 80% came from the state. And then if you wanted more than that, you had to do that locally. You had to run a levy. In Montana, the levies were permanent. Once you voted one in, it was always there. In Idaho, we have to do it every 2 years.
Mhm.
Kellogg has a streak of mine. This is my 34th year in education. The entire time I've been in education, Kellogg has had an operating levy in place. This would be next year would be the first time it wasn't in place.
Okay.
We'd also would be the only school in all of North Idaho without a levy, an operating levy next year. So it's kind of a necessary. It's a necessary component of education in Idaho to fully fund education.
And just for the basics of a levy,
Mm-hmm.
where does
Mm-hmm.
that where do those taxes come from?
Those taxes come from property taxes. And the formula is basically done with, they take mills. You say, okay, you're gonna run a levy for, ours is $7 million over 2 years, so 3.5 million.
Okay.
They say, okay, how many mills on the property value do we have to levy in order to get to 7 million or to 3.5 million?
Mhm.
They figure that out and they say this is how many. Now there's a new wrinkle in that in the tax issues of, and it's been hard to explain. 2 years ago, the state, and this is kind of it's a great thing for civics
Yeah.
classes, and basically what they came up with was House Bill 292,
Okay.
and what that was it was called taxpayer relief,
Mhm.
and it's money they collect our taxes, and they allocated, the state legislature of Idaho allocated X number of dollars to go back to pay off bonds and then levies. So they basically took tax money to come back and then gave it back to us to pay taxes, local
Okay.
taxes. And that's where there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of confusion. Basically, we don't know what our tax rate is at the start of the year because we have to turn in our paperwork for our fall levy. We had to turn in our paperwork in August, and we don't do what's called our L2 until mid-September.
Yeah.
And so it's like we're kind of playing a little bit of a guessing game.
Mhm.
For example, we turned it in and everything was okay for the fall. The levy didn't pass. We thought we would use the same numbers for the spring levy.
Mhm.
No.
Hmm.
Even
Okay.
though it's on the same year,
Yeah.
we have allocated, because we've done a really good job of caretaking taxpayer money. We paid off one of our bonds with 292 money, basically 2 years early, and we've also paid down our levy money. So now instead of being for $238 for 100,000 assessed, we've paid that down to $158.
Wow.
So now the taxpayer's only paying $158 for $100,000 assessed. But because that's what they're paying now, when we go to the fall, we have to say that that's how much it's going to increase.
Oh.
Yes, and
Okay.
so it looks, but we're still going to have next year House Bill 292 money,
Mhm.
but we can't talk about that because it's not in the formula yet. We don't have
Okay.
it yet.
Yeah.
So it's tough because we tell people, with our paying off the bond this year, what I like to say is, I firmly believe our tax burden for the local taxpayer is going to go down.
Okay. So, and I think that's such an important thing for people to understand is that it's actually cheaper than it would have been with this House bill.
Yes.
That's fantastic. That's great
Yes.
news for a lot of people to hear.
Yes, and we've also gone down. We were digging into it just this week, and we were looking at how much we were paying, almost over $400. I want to say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, in that levy cycle, I mean, it's come
Yeah.
way down, and now what the state tells us is we should do a range, of what the worst case scenario would be.
Mhm.
And so that's what we've done. We've presented this is the worst case scenario. It would be this much, and it's for so much for our kids. It's for it's transportation, it's sports, it's special education, it's for extra paras to be in the classrooms with kids that need it. It's with the levy in place, we are still our per pupil spending in Kellogg is still below the state average for per pupil spending. So our ask isn't an egregious ask.
Yeah.
It is a pretty humble ask. We're asking to be somewhere in the middle. And you guys have a higher per pupil with your levy.
Yeah.
Next year you'll have a higher per pupil expenditure than what we do,
Mhm.
even if our levy passes.
Yeah.
So and good for your community. And what that does is, it has a ripple effect. When we are paying these taxes, our schools are better, our property values go up. We have, you have less kids that are getting into trouble. You have more things for kids to do. Your police aren't rounding up your middle schoolers, and it's the way it goes.
Mhm.
And so it's good for a community, and
Yeah.
and ultimately, this is the kids that grow up here tend to stay here.
Mhm.
We've got a lot of teachers at Wallace.
Yeah.
There's a lot of teachers in Wallace that went to school in Wallace. Your mom and dad,
Yep.
and they're back here, and that's the repayment of the levy. And that's it's I, I don't have kids in the school. I'm a property owner in Kellogg.
Yeah.
I 100% support this levy.
And I think very importantly is we should talk about the value of education
Mm-hmm.
and how much more valuable it is when you can get this levy to pass and you have more money to provide things that students need.
Right.
That's kind of what our nation was founded on, was that in our democracy we need to have an educated population, and that's one of the things this levy accomplishes is it helps educate our young kids.
Yes. And if you look at the history of America, it is the history of the middle class being the greatest invention the world has ever known. And what we've done with the middle class in America, we've everything from when World War II to the internet. We've done everything, and it's come from the middle class. And we have to have a strong middle class. And what we're asking in a levy is to help us build that middle class.
Right.
We want to make sure that our kids are, they're in the average per pupil spending for the state of Idaho. They have the opportunities that all the other kids get to have, and they get to have a good quality education.
And what opportunities could be lost if this levy doesn't pass?
Oh, it's been stark. It has been. We had a bunch of meetings. I know somebody mentioned it the other day that we're kind of in a position now where it's time to go out and pass the levy, because we had to go through and make potential cuts, and we've had to build two budgets. One if the levy passes, and one if it doesn't.
Okay.
The one if it doesn't is shocking, just because if you're talking about $3.5 million, there was a great children's book when I was an elementary school teacher called "How Big Is a Million?" and it talks about how big a million is. I mean, and how big that number really and truly is. And it was shocking to us all that sat in the admin. I mean, we were adding up all the cuts and everything. Everything from bus routes are going to be the absolute minimum, because that's all we can afford. We basically made the rule that if it's not funded, if we're not funded by the state with that money, then we can't keep it. And sports aren't funded.
Yeah.
And we've got kids. We've got great kids that play sports, and we want to support them all we can. And we are going to. We didn't pretend like we were going to cut sports or anything like that. But it would have to look different. We have Orofino and Grangeville in our conference,
Right.
which are a long ways away, and those bus trips are four figures, every time they go down there. And when you have girls going down, a girls team going down, a boys team going down, you know, four times each year, it gets spendy. So we would have to figure out ways to do, different styles. Just having your boys and girls going on one bus all the way down and coming back together. Playing what we called quads in the old days.
Yeah. And of course, your volleyball team this year, very, very talented, made a state run. What would state tournaments look like without a levy?
That's once again, that's there's no money. We don't even budget money for a state tournament. When a team makes it to a state tournament as a superintendent, and I remember the football team in Victor making it to a state a state game and going, how are we going to afford this? Because it tends to be Montana's kind of like Idaho, where everything's, every game is 8 hours away, and you're going to have to spend the night somewhere, and it gets very spendy. We've got some plans in place. We do have a great community.
Yeah.
In the event that it doesn't, we will be asking our community for money to help fund those types of things, because otherwise we won't be able to afford them.
Mhm. We talk about state funding and how it makes up about 75%, but they also, of course, have requirements for each and every school that they have to meet. Would you be able to meet the requirements set by the state if this levy doesn't pass?
Yes, the general education, we think we can meet those. We might have some very large class sizes.
Okay.
We might have some of the extra things. We have a music teacher at our elementary school. They do a great job, and that leads into having a great middle school band. And I went to the band concert 2 nights ago, Tuesday night, and they were phenomenal.
Oh yeah.
And it's like it's and kids take that. We have students that are excelling at the University of Idaho with theater and their singing abilities, and we have kids in the band. We have these kids that do these things at the next level. Would we still have those? Yes. But is it going to change? Yes. We're not going to be able to go to all the places that we can afford to go to now.
Yeah, and props to your guys' band. I mean, every basketball game that I go to, they do an excellent job. They're really good.
And they bring a lot of pride.
Yep.
They show up and they play, and it's not easy to get kids to show up to a basketball game and play instruments on a night where they got to get up the next day and go to school.
Yeah.
But they do it, and they do a good job, and we're really proud of them. They've done, they come to all the games and they do a bang up job.
Yeah, I mean, that is one thing I see from Callaghan. We played in Timberlake too. They have an excellent band, but I do kind of wish that we had one. It's an excellent environment to play in, and sometimes you play different games. Attendance might be low in a couple of them, but the band always seems to bring the energy.
Right.
So
definitely, and it for me, a big coming from a big high school, you had to kind of choose. You had to choose between band and football, band and basketball, and so it was nice to when I first started working in Troy, and I was coaching girls basketball up there, and the girls would hurry up, and the JV girls would hurry up and run out after the game in their uniforms to grab their instruments so they could play in the band as the varsity came out, and that was great to see. And kids have access to that opportunity, which is a big part of the value of a small school. You get this access to all this opportunity that sometimes in a big school, even though those opportunities are there, you don't have access to them.
Yes, and some of the classes that we provide, we talk about them, those advanced classes. Sometimes with a change in landscape when it comes to finances, sometimes classes aren't provided anymore. And we're talking about that now where I've talked about it with my parents where sometimes it's not a matter of finances, but rather just finding the right teacher that's accredited to teach those dual credit AP classes. But is there any classes that might not be able to be provided anymore?
Yeah. We won't be able to do Spanish at the high school level. a foreign language, any foreign language actually. And it's just something that's not funded, it's not one of the core requirements. And so I know a lot of colleges require it,
Hmm.
and a lot of them require 2 to 3 years. And that's just one of those things, though, that we would not be able to afford without the levy.
Yeah, and I know my personal answer to this, but to the people that say, well, with the new generation of technology, you can take those classes online. What would you say? What's the difference um, between taking those classes online and being able to be in a classroom and taking it with a teacher?
You already mentioned it. You talked about the relationships that you have with your teachers. I took a Spanish class when I was in high school, and still remember the teacher. He was
Yeah.
great, and you build that relationship. I remember seeing him after I graduated from high school, from college, and having those good, positive relationships with an adult. And that's, you just don't get that online.
Yeah.
Um, and I know our IDLA program, which is a lot of access
Hmm.
in our rural schools, is under fire right now. They're holding hearings at the state legislature just today about cutting a big chunk of IDLA. And so, rural schools like the ones we have here in the Silver Valley are going to be really adversely affected by cuts to IDLA.
And I've had the privilege to take some higher level courses here at Wallace, but I can't imagine taking some of those courses online. It would almost be I wouldn't say impossible, but it would be very difficult.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially you get into, higher level math, you
Hmm.
get into calculus, you get into, college calc. It's going to be really difficult to take
Yeah.
it online.
And like the line of communication is also much more difficult. You have a question on a couple different things, and sometimes you can send that in an email and you'll expect a response in about a day. And then when you get that response, hopefully you understand it
Right,
because otherwise it's gonna be another day until you get another one.
right. And those are things that will be going away if this doesn't pass.
And I think that's a great thing for voters to hear is the impact that this levy has and how we, uh, well, as small schools in general, if we don't have this supplemental levy from the locals, the the education's landscape looks much different.
Well, yes, definitely. And there's also we were at the ISBA, the Idaho School Board Association meeting this fall, and they talked about when small schools, when they fold, when they no longer can, when they move to another town, or when they basically when they can't make ends meet anymore, the community usually folds within 2 years. And you think about, I'm here sitting in your gym,
Yeah,
and I'm looking down here, and there's basketball going on.
yeah,
There's little kid basketball down there, and we have all these gyms, and we've got all these programs going on that the school district funds. We pay for the lights, we pay for the cleaning,
yep,
that we've already talked about, and we've been talking to those groups saying, if this levy doesn't pass, we don't have the money. And I know we were looking at what, just the average charges of what we would be looking at. And I know there was one volleyball group that was in there because volleyball's big in the Silver Valley. And they'd racked up in a 2 month period almost $1,200 worth of fees that we would be
yeah,
charging. And so, it's a communal effort. It's a big group effort. I know my maintenance guy came in one day this fall, and he said, "Hey, we just lined teeters and got it all lined out." And I was like, "All set to go." And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "But when's our next football game?" And he said, "3 weeks." But they needed it for soccer.
oh,
So that's our paint, which isn't cheap, and that's
yeah,
our guys, and it takes a minute to go out there and to do that, but we do it for the little kids soccer
yeah,
program. And that's not something that people, they get a lot of bang for their buck.
mhm.
And we just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Yeah. It's really important to have those levies, and it's not. I don't think people that have been out of school for a little bit, people that might not have kids in school anymore, they tend to disconnect from the school, but they still want to see good things happen, but they don't quite understand the finances of it and how important a levy is. And too often we look just at our own paychecks and we
Mhm.
see, do I want to pay an extra, as you said, $158, which in the grand scheme of things, we look at $158 for, man, I get all this stuff, all this provided to me for $158 per 100,000. It seems like an excellent deal to me.
Yes. I know that Danielle Estelle, who's our business manager, was talking about school's great because when you have a child and you're working and when you hit school, you save so much in daycare costs and how big that is that all of a sudden you're just like, oh, there, and then you start factoring in what we're asking for in terms of of daycare, which is $500 a month.
Yeah.
It's a very good deal for the taxpayer, and we have also, we have been good stewards of taxpayer money. We can show, 34 years, and none of this is outrageous. None of it is out of line with where other schools. We asked 3.5. Grangeville was asking 3.2, and they have 900 kids, and we have 1,100.
Yeah.
Ours, Priest River passed one last fall, I believe, or the fall before last, and theirs would still be higher than us. Their per pupil spending would be higher than ours. So it's not a big ask. We have tons of we are audited every year, and we have clean audits. I mean, we spend about, I just saw online that it's administration costs, and that's all in our audit. And we have about 8% of our costs go to administration. And a smaller school like Wallace sits about 13% going towards it because they don't have the benefit of the economy of scale. But we're right in there. I mean, we're not. It's a big deal to keep it under 10%, and that's what we've always been taught and what we do. And so it's, we're hoping that people understand this is for the kids, for our community, and our kids deserve it. We got some great kids in Kellogg, and they really deserve to have a school that supports them.
Absolutely. And could we see, we come down kind of a slippery slope with if this levy doesn't pass, education suffers a little bit. Could we see problems in other areas just other than education arise due to the lack of education?
Definitely. When you start to have schools that can't meet the needs of the kids, we're going to have more crime. We're going to have more kids out. We have lots of programs. We've got basketball.
Yeah.
Let's you extrapolate that out, and next year there'll probably be pay to play. Yeah. Because we're going to be charging, if the levy doesn't pass, we'll have to charge groups to come in, and then the groups will have to turn around and ask the kids for money. So right now, it's every kid that wants to come out and play has that opportunity.
Yeah.
And so now you're going to marginalize a big group of kids, and they're not going to be out there, and they're not going to be engaged in sports. They're not going to have good role models. They're not going to be learning. They're not going to be exercising. They're not going to be learning teamwork and the fundamentals of a sport. And they're going to be out there, breaking windows or whatever it is that they have idle hands do.
Yeah, I mean, not only is it a lot of free time for a lot of things to happen, but we talk about eligibility all the time with our sports programs. And for a lot of the kids on my team, and I know at other schools, the reason that they keep those grades up and they stay involved in school is because of sports.
Yep, absolutely. And we have kids that make it and graduate because of sports. Because they had that structure, and they were playing football, and they were playing basketball, and they were running track, and they were doing all those things, and they didn't even think about the idea that they would not keep their grades up.
Yeah.
And that's the motivator, and it helps a ton of kids. And I know we've made good strides with our CTE program. We have a teacher, Corey North, at our high school that's just doing phenomenal work, and we've been able to provide him through grants and through our levy funds to provide him some absolutely top-notch things. And those kids are in there doing welding now that's, state of the art. And it's cool to see. And he's wanting to take it to the next level. And we want him to take it to the next level. We want to have people that know how to build houses in the Silver Valley. We want to know we want kids that are good in the trades. We want to be able to produce workers that go up to the mine and do a good job there. Um, but we're kind of in a holding pattern.
Yeah. And tell me, so when we talk about levies, with my dad being the athletic director, we talk about sports a
Mhm.
lot. But tell me a little bit more about that CTE program and how the levy helps with that.
The levy gives us, we do have some grants that come in with the CTE program, but the levy helps us fund things like he's trying to take it. There's a program, and I'm going to blank on the name of the program, but it's similar to FFA,
Okay.
but it's geared towards the trades,
Oh,
and it's Skills USA, and basically they go to competitions, and they'll they like I said, I was in shop class this month, and kids were in there and they were doing welding and they were showing me all their welds, and
yeah.
they were competitive with it. They were going, oh, I could do better. And I'm going, that looks like a great weld to me.
Yeah.
And they're going, no, see what I did here. And that's what we want. I mean, we want those kids that that we want them prepared that when they leave high school to go right on into the workforce and be successful. And Skills USA is one of those programs that we can fund that, but it doesn't happen at our school.
Yeah.
We practice, but and just like it'd be like playing a sport and never getting to go to a game.
Hmm.
And so we want to be able to do those things. We want to be able to support the programs so that our kids are, ready for the 21st century, either whether or not they go to college, whether or not they go into the workforce, whether or not they go to NIC, wherever it is that they want to go, we want them to be able to be prepared to go and do that.
Yeah. And part of that is just competition drives so many different things. And when you're able to provide more opportunities for competition, not only among students, a friendly competition, of course, but not only among students, but among other schools, it makes you want to strive to be the best that you can possibly be. And in the real world, that's exactly what employers are looking for.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, they want. I mean, when you interview for a job, they're going to want the best person,
Hmm.
and that's like you said, that's competition. That's competing and going and getting the job and doing a good job, and also knowing all those other skills of what it means to be a good worker. Showing up on time. If you're sick, calling in. Those things that sometimes are lost
Yeah.
on employees, and we're trying to teach all that. We've got a limited number of time. We have 13 years. We usually have kids. I want to say like 8 to 10% of their year are you actually in school. Once you go home and sleep and all those things, you're in school like 8 to 10%, typically speaking. And we've got a lot of stuff to impart to them in that short period of time.
Yeah. And also with real world applications, we talk about competition and we talk about how that in turn makes you a better employee potentially in the real world. But also tell me about leadership roles and gaining administration roles as you're in,
Mhm.
how it helps people become better leaders and better communicators and teammates.
Exactly. That's a great. We have a leadership class at our high school that is, once again, it's levy funded. I mean, without the levy, we can't continue to do our leadership class, because once again, we're looking at things that are funded by the state.
Yeah.
If we're not reimbursed by the state for it, we can't do it. And so, leadership class, which does, they do all the fun things that happen at school, the dances, the bonfires, the parades, the different things that we do around the school that the kids really enjoy, and that really works on the affective domain of the kids, that they're going to like school. And that's so important. And without that class, without those kids, I mean, they're always making videos and putting them
Yeah.
up on, and they do a great job with it. And they are learning leadership skills on a daily basis. And we've got Miss Regina and Mr. Julio who are in there doing a great job with those kids.
Yeah.
And those kids love that class, and they are able to really take our school to the next level.
Yeah, it's excellent to see all the different things that can be provided. And when we talk about voters once again that maybe don't have a huge connection to the school, well, I'm sure you remember high school dances, all the fun things that happen at school, parades, those sorts of things are they make school fun. They give kids purpose and a reason to look forward to going to school. And sometimes I hear people say, um, my uncles included, to be honest with you, um, why don't we have any? Why don't you guys have any more dances? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? Well, things are expensive,
Mhm.
and they can't always be funded.
Yeah.
And we are fortunate enough to pass a levy here, but when a levy doesn't pass, those things might go away.
Yep. Absolutely. And everything it costs money. That's exactly it. And we want our kids to be involved. We know that the more things that kids are involved in, the greater their sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And a sense of belonging is the biggest, that's the number one thing we need to cultivate. And every kid, the kids that are in CTE want to belong to those programs. The kids in football, yeah, that's all, that's your team. Those are
Yep.
your guys. I mean, those are the guys you play sports with, you remember the rest of your life. And, that's that sense of belonging. And having those little niches where everyone can find a place in a school where they belong is so important or just the beginning. That's where everything pivots off that. Kids have to feel like they belong. And if you don't have those little niche programs and those little things going on, they're not going to feel it.
Hmm. And going back to small schools, that's so important.
Hmm.
That's what makes our community and our schools, is the population isn't very big, but that's what makes us so tight knit, and that's what builds community, and it starts in the schools.
Yep.
We see class reunions. We see, that's where you make your friends, and sometimes when these programs that keep kids in school and give them a sense of belonging, when those things are cut and kids start not attending school anymore, those relationships, not only with other kids but teachers, start to struggle.
Yep. And if you want to really look at dropouts, that's that's the number one reason that kids drop out is that they just didn't find a place where they belonged. And so having those, and we work diligently to try to build that space. And no offense, but you guys are different than we were. Somebody said this year, it's like, how come kids don't go to as spectators to games anymore?
Mhm.
We've seen that across the nation. Kids don't. When we were in high school, you went to the game
Yeah.
because that was the space in which we interacted. Now kids interact in an online space.
Yes.
Everybody has social media. All the kids have social media, and they have their own space. They can sit in their bedroom at home and have their space. And so it's harder to get them to come, into the space that is a basketball game,
Yeah.
and that's where band, everyone's got to be there. And then they realize, hey, this is really cool. I'm not spending time in my room on my phone. I'm out here with my friends playing music and watching my other friends play basketball or doing whatever it is and enjoying themselves.
Yeah. I'd say the one fault of my school's really tight knit community is we do struggle with attendance sometimes, specifically in basketball games. We have had a pretty successful football team the past couple years, but our basketball team still certainly has its struggles, and the attendance did was low for certain games. But I went to the Kellogg St. Mary's game in Kellogg, and the amount of people that were there was unreal. I mean, St. Mary's just painted green on one side,
Uh-huh.
Kellogg painted purple on the other side. And it was just such a special environment to be in. And I think when people realize how much fun it can be, and once they put themselves into that, you don't have to understand the game.
Mm-mm.
You really don't. Just to be in that environment is just something special.
Yep. Yep. And get to be there and shared experience as a community. And that's happened pretty quick.
Yeah.
With I mean, I know you guys think phones have been around for a lot longer than they have. But when I was in Troy, Montana in 2005 coaching girls basketball, we were a decent team,
Yeah.
and our gym was packed every night
Mhm.
because that was the space where the
Yeah.
community came. everybody came to those games, and it was like now it's easier to, and we have a great program, Wildcat Live, where Simon Miller does a great job of broadcasting it. And so there are times when people go, "Oh, I was under the weather, so I stayed home."
Yeah.
And that's good though that program's there, but we still want people to understand that watching it online is not the same experience as being there for it.
Yeah, and I advocate this all the time. I watch a lot of college basketball, and I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to go to Spokane for some of the March Madness games.
Hmm.
And sure, you can watch those things online, and it'll be a good experience. Those commentators do a very good job. But there is something different about being in the environment, feeling the crowd around you, and just
Uh-huh.
experiencing that atmosphere.
Yep. Mrs. Farkas took Miss Channon to a basketball game
Yeah.
at the Zags, and Miss Channon has listened to my mom, who lives and breathes every Gonzaga game. I mean, she watches them all,
Yeah.
and for the last 30 years. And Miss Channon's heard her and gone, huh, and not really been into it. She went to one game and now she's a Zags fan,
Yeah.
and that's because it's that experience, and that's getting those kids out and,
Mhm.
and making sure that they recognize that there's an experience there to be had.
Yeah, it's just an excellent thing, and um, it's so much fun when everyone is involved, and it sparks conversations in school. Do you remember this play? Do you remember when there was 10 seconds left and someone hit this shot?
Right.
Like it's constant conversation throughout school, and even if you did watch it online, you don't get to feel the reactions to those plays either.
Nope.
Someone goes fast break dunk and the crowd goes nuts. Well, you see it, but you don't get to experience it.
Right.
And when you're there and you experience the crowd erupt when something like that happens, there's something really special about
Definitely. And that's coming back full circle to the levy.
that.
That's having those programs in place. We have a Marine ROTC program, junior ROTC, and it's been there for a long time, and we're trying to figure out how to keep it.
Yeah.
Because it is funded somewhat by the Marines, but the majority is from us, and when there's no money, there's no money. And
Yeah.
so I just hope that everybody that goes into the voting booth on May 19th, they understand the choices they're making. That one of the choices is, and we're going to lose a lot of positions. We're also going to lose programs.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ones that we're really worried about.
Mhm. And in a small community like this, each and every vote matters.
Mhm.
We've had votes here in Wallace decided by seriously one vote, and so um, it's absolutely vital for these people to go out and vote. And I think a lot of times what I've learned is they just assume that the school has money. They just assume that we have plenty of money and things will go on as usual.
Mhm.
But it's so important for those people that they want the schools to succeed. They want good things for the school, but they don't realize how impactful it is to go out and vote yes for this levy, um, and to go out and make sure that these kids do have these opportunities, because money doesn't come from nowhere.
Nope. And communities, it was built this way so that communities would buy into their schools.
Mhm.
And we're not alone. Lakeside, they had trouble with the levy. Priest Rivers had trouble with levies. I was shocked at how much less support there was in Wallace this year.
Yes.
Because 2 years ago we ran at the same time as you guys, and we were at like 66%, and you guys were I think 68, or we were 64, and it was pretty close. But
Yeah.
and it was all the way down to like low 50s.
52. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, uh-oh. And mostly it's what we're working on for the next. We're gonna go to spring break, and when we come back, we're gonna have 45 days, and we're gonna try to educate our community. and it's kind of what we do. We're educators. We got a bunch of teachers.
Yeah.
We got a bunch of principals. We got people that educate, and we've got to educate them on why this is important, why they should vote for it, and what it supports, and just throw the facts out there. House Bill 292 is one of those things that even when you're dealing with our business manager who has a degree in business, it takes her a minute to wrap her head around it. And so that's going to be a tougher call for us to make sure that people understand this isn't going to be, what, and the ballot's going to look different than what the actuality is, because we're not allowed to put on the ballot anything about the money that's not here yet.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and I get that, but I just, we got to make sure everybody understands what's at stake.
Yeah. And I think when you talk about how complicated this is, it's so valuable for these people to be educated on what it means for them individually, and how things do look better for the entirety of the community as we get this money from House Bill 292, and it makes things cheaper for each and every person.
Yeah, and the historical, what we're paying historically per $100,000 it has come so far. It's almost in half, and so we're doing, and we paid off a bond that was put in place 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And 20 years ago at least, before any of us were even around. They put this bond in place, and we paid it off early, so that's no longer on your taxes. And so it's, I keep telling people the tax burden from the district will go down.
Yeah.
And I'm confident saying that. I can't guarantee it because I don't have next year's 292 money yet.
Yeah.
But going by an average, we're going to do okay.
And I think what I've learned as a nation as a whole is when people don't understand something, they tend to push it away. And I think that might be what's happening here, is because they don't understand it, they tend to reject it, and that's why we saw so many no votes.
Yes. I think there was a lot of politics that was at play in the fall election. I'm hoping that people understand that schools should not be drug into the political arena.
Yes.
Schools are our local schools. We need them. They're not Republican or Democrat.
No.
They are our schools, and this is something that's good for everybody. And that's a big push that we're trying to do right now.
Yeah. And when we talk about politics, this is what both parties stand for. We want our populations to be educated. And this is where we get to form our own opinions, our own unbiased opinions, away from teachers. Don't influence, nobody else influences. We get the facts, and we get to decide for ourselves what we want to be. And this is where we get to decide for ourselves what we believe and what we want to vote for.
Right. Exactly. And that's ultimately, and you hear so much of the social media, one side or the other, that it's difficult to keep the eye on the prize and to focus on what matters. And I just hope people realize that it's our kids. We are doing this for the kids of the Kellogg School District.
Yeah, and when we talk about what we see online, that's another valuable thing that school teaches us, is how to navigate those different things that we see online, because it's a whole new landscape with new technology and phones and social media. We have to be taught and educated on how to use these things by people that were trained to teach us how to do it.
When we were running in the fall, we were posting information. And what we noticed was in the comments section, people would be bringing up questions that were easily answered in the information. And somebody would say, and somebody finally said to somebody, "Did you read it?" And they said, "I never read all that stuff." They just make comments. And that's one of the things that we have to consider is, there are things with perception bias, and people want to maintain their perception because it becomes an identity. And what we're trying to say is we don't want to have all that involved.
Yeah.
We just want you to say, hey, we want to run a good school for kids,
Yeah.
and this is what we need. It's even with our levy, even if it passes, we have small cuts we're going to have to make.
Yeah.
And we know that. And
Hmm.
once again, it's not an ask for the Taj Mahal of school districts. I mean, it's not. And we haven't wasted any money. We have clean audits, and we just got to get the people to realize how much we do within our local community.
Yeah. And me and Miss Chan talk about this all the time, but people like to they hear things online and they hear things from political influencers that are big people in whatever political party they may align with. And they say things about certain schools, about certain education bills or whatever it may be. It could be really anything in the political landscape. And they just hear that and okay, that's what I believe. You're one of the biggest people in my party. You said that, now I believe it.
Right.
Well, that is kind of the what we're advocating here for in education is going and forming your own opinion. And the thing with the levy is you may have to do a little bit of research if you really want to understand it. Um, and I think the more that you educate yourself on this specific topic, I believe the more you're going to be in favor of passing this levy.
And that's where we're at. That's what we got to do is make sure we educate people. And I know we're going to have a bunch of workshops. We've got a parents group that is holding meetings and trying to help get things out. And I know the union has said that they would do whatever they could do to help. There's a lot of people that are supportive.
Yeah.
And we just got to make sure we get the word out.
And I think one thing that is so valuable about a podcast is that sometimes, including myself, we do see things they're long reads. We see a news article that might be quite lengthy, and we're like, I don't know if I want to read all of that. But the cool thing about a podcast is you put it on in the background, you listen to it, and for me it's much easier to understand information hearing it. Hearing it instead of just reading it. And sometimes it's tough for me to comprehend what I read sometimes. My eyes glaze over it, but they don't understand it. So having this alternative to get education out, and to get information out, it's really key.
Definitely. And when you invited me on, I jumped right on it because of that. I mean, because we don't have, we have a newspaper. It comes out twice a week, but it's the old days of everybody reading the paper. It's not there anymore,
Yeah.
and so this is a different medium. It's really cool. I really appreciate you extending the invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I encourage people to further educate themselves on this and go and talk to people. Go and talk to educators. If you have a kid at school, go and talk to them and see what their daily life is like. And when you listen back to this and you hear all the things that you have explained that these levies fund, you'll start to realize how much their lives may change.
Yeah.
How much a student's life may change at school. And then I think that's when you start to realize this is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Our board chair, Alexa Griffin, said that we would never recover.
Yeah.
And it would, and we already see something, where we're going to lose people because, they see this big cliff coming and, it's people's livelihoods.
Yeah.
And, they've got to feed their kids and they've got to, have a place where they can go and have a job and have health insurance and have these things. And, we're looking at 50 to 70 people,
Yeah.
which is a lot of families that will be adversely affected.
And it's frankly, to no fault of their own. They do everything they can, but at the end of the day, you have to put food on the table.
Yep.
You have to have a roof over your head. And sometimes that involves tough decisions. And unfortunately, those decisions aren't made by you. They're made by
Right.
voters.
Right. And so our job is to make sure the voters realize that, I mean, looking at how much we were levying per $100,000 and the way that it has just come way
Mm.
down, that's going to be a big part of our campaign, is that we are being good stewards with taxpayer money.
Yeah.
And we're not. We are just trying to provide a good education for the kids in the Kellogg School District.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to end on. Just one final note. Um, we here and on this podcast, we try to bring on educators, and I think you did a great job highlighting all the things that our educators do, including yourself, to look out for the best interests of our students. And as you said so many times, you're looking out for the best interests of the Kellogg students, and that's very important. And you care just as much as anyone about the students at your school, and you try to do what you can, but sometimes you need a little bit of help from the voters to get that extra money so you can do your job to the best of your ability.
Right. Absolutely.
So, yeah, it was a pleasure having you on.
Well,
I think
thank you very much. It
this
was really fun to come here and hang out and talk levy.
yeah, and I think it was a productive conversation that people will be able to learn a little bit from. So I think that's great. And May 19th, a date to remember. Mark it on your calendars. Get out there and vote.
Yep. And thank you very much,
Thank
Cooper.
you.